You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA. You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA.
Hello and welcome to episode 371 of the fabulous Peltoncast, sponsored by our friends at Pagliacci Pizza. I'm your co-host, Kevin Pelton.
And I'm Tristan Carcino.
And we are coming to you from Renton, Washington, home of the Super Bowl 48 champion Seattle Seahawks.
And I guess maybe as you're listening to this, we'll wish you a happy 4th of July.
Yes.
You hadn't even considered that, had you?
I wasn't going to
Had not crossed your mind.
I thought we were going to point out that it was the Walt Jones episode.
It is also the Walt Jones episode.
Yeah.
But there is a holiday as this is being released. Look,
that is true.
Top notch at scheduling these sort of things.
I mean, I feel like people may need some podcast listening on commutes.
We're going to rank the songs on Born in the USA a little bit later today.
No, we're going to rank the photos of you on the 4th of July.
We should actually talk.
Imitating.
Let's talk Born in the USA at the end.
Okay.
We don't have that much. Let's get through all the sports.
We gotta talk the sports, and then you'll get some some Born in the USA at the end as a treat.
Yeah.
As a dessert. Well, let's start with this week's beer. Here's our search for Seattle's best IPA. Takes us north on I-5 to Bellingham.
Almost every single brewery has been north on I-5.
Okay. But it's north of Seattle on I-5. Boundary Bay Brewing in the Northwest Original IPA. And I'm a little confused by this description. I did not do any research. But our classic IPA, Inside Passage Ale, is that what they originally named it? Or are they just saying that Inside Passage Ale is another possible use of the acronym IPA? First graced the Pacific Northwest with its presence in 1996, the big malt backbone and a heavy dose of Amarillo hops lead the way for this true Northwest-style IPA. The malts include Two Row Pale, Munich, Karistan, I don't know how to pronounce that one, Carcino, Vienna, and then the hops are Centennial and Cascade, in addition to that heavy dose of Amarillo hops.
There we go.
So
you could smell the Amarillo hops. I'm a little bit. I don't know.
You're questioning the bottle here?
Yeah, I'm questioning. I'm not sure about co-opting fisherman culture.
I feel like in Bellingham it's more okay.
It's more okay to co-opt fisherman culture.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I think brewing culture and fisherman culture are actually as intertwined as this bottle might think they are.
I mean, I don't know. What is the history of the IPA?
Well, I was traveled on boats.
I assume so. So that's maybe a future podcast for us. Do you have any thoughts about the current rankings of IPAs?
Not really at all.
Okay. Would you like to hear my rankings?
That sounds great.
I have Bodhi's Office still at the top.
Okay.
The first one we had. Stoop Citra.
Okay.
Pike Brewing Space Needle. The Old Schoolhouse Brewery Rude Awakening.
I thought that one was pretty good.
Week. The Space Dust. Although hopefully that's at some point going to get crushed by Cloudburst.
Mm-hmm.
The Two Bears Wonderland. Black Raven's Trickster. Future Primitive Queer Bear.
Was that eligible, the queer beer?
Not technically.
Okay.
It's also not at the top of the list, so I think we're okay. The Rooftop Tropical Staycation, the Rubens Crikey, and the Georgetown Lucille.
Seems like a fine list to me.
There you go.
I don't know.
Again,
we're just top-notch podcasters here. But I wholeheartedly agree.
We have really nailed this podcasting thing a decade in.
They're all kind of good. There has not been a single beer. This was one of the complaints, maybe feedback that I'd given you about the search.
That's fair.
It's just when you're eating food, something about food sticks with you a little bit more than beer does.
Yeah, the food sticks with you.
But if I'm eating them all in one meal,
yes.
I'm going to remember them a lot better.
We also haven't necessarily talked that much over the course of the podcast because the way it works is not that we eat the food during the podcast. We eat it during the week and then talk about it on the pod.
It's a different sensation. And I think the variations between different types of foods, like people are making them so radically different. This might be a palate issue also. I don't know. Maybe if my IPA palate was more refined, I'd be like, whoa, this is drastically different.
Maybe we'll continue to develop over the course of this. We've not brought on an IPA expert to talk to us yet, which hopefully we will at some point. This one, it's interesting.
Condescending person we ever talked to.
Could be a kind brewer.
I'm sure that they would be very friendly. Nice
Jordan
person.
McKay wasn't condescending.
No,
as he
that's
goes
not
about
what I'm
marketing.
talking. I'm not saying
I know.
any expert in any field is condescending.
You're just saying beer in
An
particular.
expert in this one particular field.
Oh, buddy. Oh, this one, it's interesting. They mentioned the heavy dose of Amarillo hops. This does not feel like a super hoppy beer to me. You agree with that? Your
Not
look
super-
indicates you
it's,
don't.
It's a different flavor more than hops.
Right.
Yeah,
It's heartier somehow.
this is definitely not going to be in the
At the top?
no.
Okay. Well, let's get to our toast.
This is the worst of the beers we've had.
Wow.
Not the worst. It's still good, but this is the one that maybe it's because you're prompting me right now.
We're getting the
I'm,
takes.
I'm thinking more about it, but this does not. You like that? That's what you want is that strong hop flavor, right? That's why the fresh hop season. We're all so excited about fresh hop season when you can taste the hops.
That's a great point.
It's a different aroma.
It's maltier.
Yes, it is much maltier.
We start with congratulations to Luis Castillo, the only Mariner chosen for the AL All-Star game, AL All-Star team for the game in Seattle on July 11th. This will be Castillo's first appearance with the Mariners, obviously, since he joined them after last year's All-Star game. Third overall for Luis Castillo.
Have you felt like this All-Star game is kind of just like at the beginning of the season, it was like All-Star game, All-Star game, All-Star game. And now as it's coming, you're like, oh, God, that's next week.
Given how much less Mariners I have watched over the course of this season, not entirely the Mariners' fault, also for outside reasons. Yes. I think also, like, people were imagining the All-Star game coming off of the playoff appearance last year with the excitement coming into the season. It's going to be like the high point of this amazing season of Mariners baseball. And then the Mariners season happened.
Yeah, that's
And then it's like, oh, how many homegrown stars? Who's going to join Julio on the AL All-Star team? And then it's just Luis Castillo. Although they could have some injury replacements, I suppose.
Are you out of town? The All-Star Futures game is on Saturday.
I am out of town.
You're
for
out
the
of town.
All-Star
I've got
Futures game.
baseball.
I will be.
The number one thing that distracts me from paying attention to baseball is baseball.
That is true. A professional baseball is ruined for you by youth baseball.
It's really kind of like they have like every Sunday.
That's why we could spend so much time following baseball when we were children, because we were not
That's true.
not busy playing it organized fashion. We could fit our going to Kent Ridge High School or Lake Young's Elementary School. Shout out to the Fairwood listener.
You're really hammering the Fairwood.
I mean, it feels appropriate, but we can schedule that around the Mariners game that day.
It's funny, they have like Little League days at the ballpark, and every single one of those days, I have been at children's baseball. It's just the Little League schedule is maybe a little bit different. I don't think they play on Sundays, but like anything that young people in baseball are participating in as it pertains to the Mariners, I have not been able to do because I've been at a baseball game, which I think is the optimal case.
The most baseball thing you can do is
Yeah.
be at a baseball game.
Yeah. The most baseball thing you can do is not pay attention to the Mariners because of baseball.
Okay, I want to talk to you about a specific July 4th Mariners game.
Wow, I was hoping you'd bring this up.
Do you remember the 1994 Mariners game at Baltimore?
I really don't.
This is a very memorable 4th of July for me. Rich Amaral in this game made how many errors?
Oh, I kind of
2 errors, giving him 15 for the season through July 4th at second base.
Oh my God.
Was set down after this game. A really crushing moment for us as children, me in particular.
He made his 14th and 15th error
13th and 14th. Oh, yeah, 14th and 15th, yes.
on the 4th of July.
On the 4th of July. And then they called up A-Rod subsequent to this.
Wow.
And A-Rod made his major league debut at age 19.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I did not realize that Rich Amaral is who got sent down.
Oh,
for
I
A-Rod.
haven't mentioned that trivia on this
Wow.
podcast in that
Happy
long.
4th of July.
So that was 19 years ago, or 29 years ago, many, many years ago. Afterwards, we watched the movie The Jerk.
On the
Also,
4th of July.
a formative experience for me. So
Okay.
I quoted it not long ago, The Jerk. I quoted it incorrectly, but I quoted it nonetheless. The Mariners lost that one to the Orioles 9-4, dropping to 35-46 in the 1994 season, which was not a 2023 style disappointment, but in the ballpark.
Can I tell
sure.
you my 4th of July tradition aside from dressing like Bruce Springsteen on the cover of Born on the... We'll see if I do it tomorrow. I don't know. But the Simpsons episode, the Summer of 4 featuring 2. Are you aware of this episode?
The Summer of 4 featuring 2. It doesn't.
They
ring
go
a
to
bell.
the Flanders' beach cabin, right? There's notes everywhere. Do you remember this?
I don't.
Lisa has her yearbook and nobody signs it, and then she meets a bunch of friends at this summer beach cabin.
Yeah.
And then they find out that she's a nerd, and Bart is like a nerd for them, right? And then they have this epic time at a theme park. There's fireworks, and then the friends come back around. That to me is the number one 4th of July piece of media.
I may end up watching The Sandlot for the 4th of July.
Okay, there's a big the thing about we're getting into the 4th of July. Here we go. Okay. I feel like we must have talked about this. The thing about the 4th of July in media is that it is the crest of summer, right? In media, the 4th of July is the most epic night that you have all summer. So there's all this time leading up to it. All of this action is happening, and then the primary event that happens in your story happens on the 4th of July, right? There's epic 4th of July Wonder Years. There's 4th of July Stranger Things, The Sandlot. It's like that is the
That's interesting
most
because like the interesting thing about the 4th of July from a television standpoint is there is no new scripted network television
but
in July.
as a thematic device,
Yes.
the 4th of July is the most important day of the summer.
Well, that's because
in media.
most people don't have Seafair Sunday, which obviously was the high point of our summer as children. When we
I
are
feel
writing
like not
our
Seafair Sunday. I think it was Tri-City Waterfalls growing up was the more
Fair.
important because we'd go to Eastern Washington, hang out with the other casinos.
for like a week.
With the casinos.
I mean, obviously the famous cousin Katie had to be there as the MVP.
Yeah. Hanging out with Katie and Chris as the MVPs, having access to their pool.
Oh,
Like when you're kids, if you get a weekend at a pool, that is an important
but it
moment.
was like
Other
sometimes
young
we would
people.
go for a full week.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. That was like a little bit later. But like that drive, that to us was like the peak moment of the summer.
Fair.
But in actuality, at least if you're in, I assume the same school schedule or whatever, the 4th of July is like the first event of summer.
Well, I
It's
mean,
like the
that's
kickoff
one
to
difference
summer.
between the West Coast and the East Coast. The East Coast, you're out of school for a long period of time by the 4th of July.
So you could have the beginnings of your relationships and then have them crest on the 4th of July.
Yeah, it's kind of the
There's
midpoint of the
still
summer on the East
A
Coast.
lot of summer after.
Sure.
It's a little strange. If you were to timing wise, if you were to guess where the 4th of July hits, you would think it was like 2-3 weeks. It would be like
I mean, Seattle schools just got out. Like last Friday was their last day, wasn't it?
yeah. But it's like Capitol Block Party time, you know,
Yeah.
3rd, 4th week of July, something like that. That's the actual, like, that's the crest of summer where you still have more after. You still have more summer. You're not really stressed about going back to school yet. And you've had time to have your summer relationships build up. That is the exact peak of summer, is like 3rd, 4th week of July.
Okay. And then you get into August, the Sunday scaries of months.
It's true.
It's coming soon.
August is one long Sunday, especially because school's starting really early now.
It's already really hazy at sunset tonight.
Well, there's fires in Canada.
Yeah.
But the other thing is when you become an adult and start caring about football, you get pretty excited about August because all of a sudden you're like, football's coming.
You're more excited about
And
that
your
than I
life is
am.
horrible all the time. You just have to work constantly. So it's not like you have summer off.
True. Good point.
But then they give you a little bit of football as it gets colder.
Just like we're giving people a little bit of Born of the USA at the end of this
A little
podcast.
bit.
Just a taste. Continue our toast. Don't know how we got there from here. Congrats to Ezzy Megbagor, voted by
We've only
WNBA
done one
coaches.
toast, huh?
We have only one done toast. A reserve for the All-Star game on July 16th in Las Vegas. This is the first All-Star appearance for Megbagor at age 23.
Wow.
Surely not the last.
The Storm have more All-Stars than they do wins. Did I make that joke
Still
last
not-
week?
yes. Maybe offline.
But now there's another player. No, that was on the podcast.
Okay, it was.
Now there's another player, and it's actually true.
It's still not true. Absolutely not true. They have 4 wins, 2 All-Stars.
And
4
in that
wins.
week that passed, did they get a third All-Star? Or Ezzy Megbagor?
She is the second. They did get more All-Stars in the past week than wins.
Because last week they had 4 wins, and they still got 4 wins.
That is accurate.
The number of All-Stars keeps going up, and the number of wins stays the same.
I did a podcast selecting All-Stars last week after we recorded.
Okay.
On the Her Hoop Stats podcast. One of the things I looked at on there was the net rating with Ezzy and Jewel Lloyd on the bench.
Okay.
And the Storm are getting outscored by approximately 30 points per 100 possessions.
Did you pick Ezzy for the All-Star game?
Of course.
I thought you went out of your way not to pick players from the city of Seattle for honors. Am I wrong about that?
Only if they're born
Okay.
in the city of Seattle.
Okay. If they play there now, then you're mildly
Only
okay with them.
If they were born there. By the way, okay, another aside. The Coach K subplot in this season of The Bear.
Oh,
I did
yeah.
not see that
kind of
coming.
strange.
Chicago native, I suppose.
Is he Coach K?
Yeah. All right. Next up, congrats to Oil
Makes him
Ring
like
coach.
14% more likable. I'm not going to lie.
Wow. 14%.
You don't think so?
I just didn't put a number on it.
It's not
also,
a-
I always knew that he was from Chicago. It's not new information to
It's
me.
not a lot, but it's like it's a tangible number. It's not like 1%.
Yeah.
Where it's negligible. Like it's a tangible number.
Okay. 14%. Congrats to Oil Ring coach Laura Harvey, who agreed to a contract extension through 2025. Well-deserved for Harvey, who has led Oil Ring to nothing but regular season success since returning to that role during the 2021 season. And lastly this week,
Finally.
congrats to J. Michael Kelly and the UA Beacon Electric awarded the Governor's Cup in Madison, Indiana as part of the Madison Regatta on accumulated points after the final was stopped when the U40 bucket list racing driven by Dustin Eccles completed a full 360-degree flip
man.
at the end of lap number 1. This was such a big deal. Pat McAfee tweeted about it.
Whoa!
And TMZ had a post about it.
Whoa!
H1 was having a moment this weekend.
That
This
is
flip.
wild.
It was one of those
I
incredible
love
ones.
that you're citing as a positive TMZ and Pat McAfee.
First off, that's my coworker, Pat McAfee.
Okay. Is he at ESPN?
Yes,
I
yes.
had no idea.
That was a big news story a few weeks back.
Oh, he just was hired at ESPN.
Very recently,
Okay.
yes. I mean, he had been doing College Game Day, I think, previously. This is one of those flips where the boat goes, like, makes a complete rotation, lands on the tail, kind of, it flops down, and continues going forward. I mean,
really?
It was not still running it at that point, but still had the momentum
force.
after the flip. So it's like it's basically a somersault that the boat did.
That's wild. What did TMZ have to say about this?
I didn't click on it. I just saw it retweeted that they had posted about it, which was amazing.
Wow, this is a huge moment.
Yeah, you got to capitalize on this one. So, of course, they're not going to have a race for 4 weeks. With Storms preventing the final from being rerun, it was the second consecutive race victory awarded on points to start the 2023
what a season.
H1 Unlimited Hydroplane season. Next race is the Columbia Cup, July 28th through 30th in Tri-Cities,
There we go.
Washington.
Are you going to that?
TBD.
Okay.
We'll be in Central Washington that weekend, so we're not far.
Be the most important weekend of your summer.
It could be. It could be. Should we talk Damian Lillard?
Yeah, we already did for so long last week, and none of it mattered after. But
I don't know if it didn't matter after.
it's funny because, okay, so I get the notification that Damian Lillard has asked for a trade.
That was back before Twitter was completely broken.
And it was after all of our conversation, I still wanted Damian Lillard to be traded. Like, I can understand the positives of Damian Lillard being on the team forever. But ultimately, it just felt like it was time for both parties to move on, right? I think this is a nice marriage of a trade request. It's not necessarily at the expense of, like, the Blazers are going to be competing for a championship right now. There's going to have these great moments. They're a young team who needs to get younger. They need to rebuild the roster around somebody else at this point.
And that somebody else is Jeremy Grant, who has agreed to a 5-year, $160 million contract on that.
But I still think it's important when you're rebuilding a roster to have an adult in the room too. I don't think it is terrible to have Jeremy Grant. He's probably being overpaid or whatever. But, like, I see these contracts and I'm like, is anybody that overpaid at this point?
I think eventually, yes. But Nate Duncan made a strong case that contract will be very tradable because he's good enough that teams will still want to aggregate their players who are not as good to get him. So,
And he's probably going to age fairly. He's not that old, right?
he's 29.
He's 29. It's 4 years?
5 years.
5 years? he will be a competent role player. He'll be a good role player for like 3 or 4 years. He'll be traded before the contract is out. He'll be gone from Portland probably 3 years.
I agree with this assessment.
But
I would take the under on that one.
But ultimately, this was a nice trade request for both parties. This was one that made sense. I don't think there will be long-term hard feelings in Portland, and I don't think there should be long-term hard feelings
there
on
absolutely
either
shouldn't
side.
be. But I always come back to the Sean Kemp example of how upset a lot of people in Seattle were after his trade request, which came after, with a team that had come within a game at the conference finals the year before. It was a very different situation and a tumultuous, let's say, season for Sean Kemp leading up to it. He's still maybe, GP's more beloved than him. Ken Griffey's probably more beloved than him. But he's still a top 3 most beloved Seattle athlete of the 90s, without question.
It was nice that Sean Kemp never had any too good moments anywhere else.
Well, yes.
I feel like Griffey's kind of the same way. It's like Griffey left Seattle and his career was more or less over.
That's an interesting point to think of. Randy Johnson obviously achieved a lot of success.
And that's why he's
leaving
not
Seattle.
ours as much.
A-Rod, positives and negatives of his post-Mariners stint.
I think A-Rod's post-Mariners, he had some of the best seasons of all time. Positives and negatives?
Yeah, I think also the steroids kind of.
Yes,
kind of tainted a lot of it.
Okay.
I don't think A-Rod is like
performance-wise. A-Rod had some pretty nice years.
That's why that's the positives. The others, everything else was the negatives. But you think of like Kemp, Griffey, Peyton. Was at the tail end of his career when he left. Russell Wilson so far. It's an interesting thing. I guess maybe the answer is just that players tend to request trades after they're already past their prime.
Yes.
So, whereas A-Rod left
Ray
when
Allen
he was
had
like 26.
elsewhere.
He did.
He didn't request a trade, but like Ray Allen had big moments.
Decidedly did not request a trade.
In multiple different places. I feel like when most people think of Ray Allen, they think of him as a Celtic.
I agree, especially because he only made the playoffs the one time in Seattle. He'll always be a Sonic to us.
Anyway, what's going to happen?
A lot of people have pointed out that other teams can easily trump what Miami is able to offer here. I don't think that necessarily means they will. I'm not saying that there won't be interest in Damian Lillard, but it's been widely reported that maybe Brooklyn is on his list, but Miami is a pretty clear number 1 on his list.
Who are other teams though?
So Utah, for example, is a team that's been thrown out. Is they could offer tons of draft picks for Damian Lillard, who played his college ball down the road at Weber State.
Would Utah want? Is that a Danny Ainge trade?
I don't think so. Doesn't strike me. It strikes me as the opposite of the trades they just made last year.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to be like, is this a good marriage of team and player? And I think Danny Ainge isn't stupid. He understands. He understands where the Jazz are right now and that they're not one Damian Lillard away from really competing.
Exactly. And I think the other thing that if you're a team like Utah, you have to think about is, okay, let's say you get Damian Lillard and he plays a couple years there and then he's unhappy and he demands a trade from your team. And now he's got a couple years left on his contract, so he's got more leverage to do that. What's his trade value going to be in 2 years when he's just kicking in that extension? That
There's no fucking way the Jazz are trading for him. That's out of the question.
I would be very surprised.
Why wouldn't they have just kept Donovan Mitchell?
The third team that is a consideration to me, besides in Brooklyn, may not even be if they're supposedly a candidate to take Tyler Hero as part of a 3-team trade that would send Lillard to Miami. Philly would be the other team to watch, since they would be highly motivated to bring in Damian Lillard. And the 2 years from now scenario doesn't matter because you need to try to win a championship with Joel Embiid right now.
Has Daryl Morey loves trading for superstars, right?
That is correct.
Has Daryl Morey ever lost a trade for a superstar?
Yes, he has.
Which one?
Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul.
Well, was that actually Daryl Morey's trade?
I think there might have been some awareness that Daryl Morey was not necessarily going to be in Houston to deal with the downside of that trade long term.
Beyond that one, though, when you traded for Harden,
someone did not give that a good grade.
But like long term, has that affected them that much?
Well, it's weird because on the one hand, they got rid of Ben Simmons,
yeah,
which turned out to be great. On the other hand, they could have gotten Tyrese Halliburton for Ben Simmons had they so desired. And think about how that would have worked out.
And then the trade with the Thunder to get Harden is a straight swindling.
Yes. Like, the question with the Sixers is whether they would include Tyrese Maxey. If they're willing to include Tyrese Maxey, like, that's a better piece than, Miami can include realistically, and probably a better player than any other team is going to offer in return.
Why does James Harden not want to be in Philly?
I haven't talked to James Harden. Seems like there's some unhappiness with what the Sixers were, the Sixers' willingness to negotiate with him on a new contract.
Okay. But I do think if you're Philly, you can say different than Utah or whatever. You can say to yourselves, we can make Dame Lillard happy for a couple of years.
And we can win a championship if we get him right now.
Are they the best team in the East?
I mean, it depends what it takes and what a James Harden trade possibly in conjunction with this would return. It's plausible.
It's a lot of ins and outs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of moving pieces.
But there's the other factor that, let's say, if Miami trades for Dame Lillard as Tyler Hero plus picks or whatever, is Miami now better than Philly?
Yes.
Is Miami the best team in the East?
I don't know about Boston and Milwaukee relative to them. I would have to think about that some more.
But so if you're Philly, you're pretty motivated to not have Dame Lillard be on the Heat.
Yes.
What about the Clippers? Is that a conversation at all?
No.
Just
because
because
to offer.
They don't have assets.
Harden is a much more realistic player for them to get.
Are there any other teams?
My colleague Ramona Shelburne reported that Lillard has great respect for the San Antonio organization. That also does not seem like a move you make immediately after drafting a 19-year-old number 1 overall.
Do they have players to trade for Dame?
I think of recent first-round picks and good young players on good contracts. Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell.
He's going to find his way to Miami. I do feel like the amount that we read that it's not just going to be Miami makes me...
It reinforces to you that it's going to be Miami?
That I feel like a lot of people are having these conversations or putting it out there in the media to push the conversation that it could be somebody else. And I think it's important for Portland to make sure that there are possible destinations or whatever.
Which I think they'll be in that position. They'll be able to pit Miami in a negotiation against at least one other team. I'm optimistic about that.
And if it's Philly and they're just using Philly for leverage or whatever, and Dame ends up in Miami, then they got more out of the package.
Yeah. And everyone walks away happy.
I just think there's been too much conversation about it not definitely being Miami, which makes me think it's definitely Miami.
Right.
I guess we'll see. I mean, I think, look, the reality is, how much are we going to talk about the Blazers next year? Probably depends on how good Scoot is. They're probably going to be.
Is.
They have their own draft picks next year, right?
Lottery protected.
Don't think that'll be an issue. It's going to be a rebuilding season for Portland. It'll probably be fun in a lot of ways, though.
It'll be interesting, like, depending what they get out of a Dame trade, I think they could be a little underrated because people tend to underrate. I mean, Utah last year is the classic example of you trade a suit, and like, not that they're going to get Lowry Markkanen in return and someone's going to blossom into an all-star unexpectedly. But like, if you trade a superstar for 3 good players, it doesn't actually hurt you as much as you think people think it does, because those 3 good players are probably replacing players in the rotation who weren't as good.
Isn't it kind of like Oklahoma City the first year after?
That could be another comparison. I mean, I don't think they're getting Chris Paul in this one or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but yeah. And then the question about those teams always is, well, how motivated are they to go for it all season? OKC did and nearly won a playoff series. Utah traded away 3K players in midseason and tanked pretty hard the rest of the way.
But they're going to want to get Shaden a ton of minutes. They're going to want to get Scoot a ton of minutes.
Yeah. But the front court they could improve, especially, I don't know if they would land a center in this trade. It's possible that Yusuf Nurkic would be included. He is the only center currently on their roster, other than
I feel
Ibubaji.
like one of the important things that they can do in the trade is get rid of Nurk, though, is move Nurk's contract.
He does not really fit with the current direction of the Blazers. God bless Nurk.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, we'll talk about Dame's career in Portland when he's actually traded, but it was awesome watching him. We had some amazing moments.
We talked about it last week, yeah.
And I don't live in Portland. When the Sonics come back, I won't care at all. So this is a great position to be in for us.
Well, speaking of great positions to be in, we're not going to do that because it's time for your favorite segment.
Don't burn yourself. We got Mariners hot takes coming at ya.
All-Star reserves were announced this weekend, and the Mariners predictably ended up with just one All-Star. And the game being played next week is arriving with a whimper. All of the energy and excitement around it that opening day brought has been tossed aside and ignored, much like Jerry DiPoto over the offseason. This year could not be any more different than the last time Seattle hosted an All-Star game way back in 2001. And I'm here to tell you why. That's a great thing.
Wow.
While some might say 2001 was one of the best baseball seasons of all time, one of the greats, a rookie MVP, the most wins in history, to me, it was an unmitigated failure. As little as this current roster can have in common with the 2001 roster, the better. It was an aging roster that limped their way to the playoffs, barely hanging on and not fulfilling the expectations the city had. They lost to the Yankees and proudly said goodbye to the playoffs for the next 20 years.
Limp to the playoffs.
Well, if you want to have your baseball celebration in July, then have fun with all of that. But this team in 2023 is playing for the second half, for when it counts. They swing for the fences, not slap singles, and are building something greater in baseball in the city of Seattle. The hope is back. A monster second half is coming, and unlike 2001, a monster playoffs as well, because this team isn't playing for July, playing for all-time singles records. They're poised to win in October and beyond. And I personally, now that we're almost here, can't wait for a great second half of baseball.
I gotta say, even by all takes Tristan standards, this is one of the most shocking takes in the history of this podcast.
We're back, baby. We are so back.
Do you want to know what the Mariners' record was in the second half of the season?
Last
after the
year?
All-Star break. No, in 2001.
Oh. No, I don't.
53-22.
It was worse than it was in the first half, right?
They were 63-24 in the first half. So it was worse in the second half, I agree. Also, they were so far ahead, it really did not matter at the end of the season. Although they won almost all their games at the end of the season.
Let me just say, this is a take, but you have to kind of hear me here a little bit.
No, I mean, well, okay. By the way, they won, let's see, 10 of their last 12 games to get to 116 wins. So that was their limping to the playoffs. And they also won a playoff series. Like that's not a small thing to have won
congrats.
a playoff series. In this
116 games and we won a playoff series.
You know,
Nice fucking year, Mariners.
They've never gone
What did
beyond
you do
that.
for the next 20 years after
Okay,
that?
well, I agree that the next 20 years were not so good.
This was the last gasp of a dying organization for 20
hold on,
years.
hold on,
The 2001
hold on.
Mariners.
As I need to remind you,
They won 93 games the next year.
93 games the next 2 years, which is more than they won in 2022, right? Yeah, it's more than they've won either of the last 2 years.
Last gasp.
So I'm gonna, if you're willing to take a bet on whether the Mariners go better than 53-24 after the All-Star break,
Not necessarily that. They'll win as many playoff series.
I do not agree with this assessment.
If you
Also,
count-
you
if you
don't
count the
count,
wild
you
card
do
round
not
as
count the
playoffs.
wild card round. No, it's not the same. It's like saying you won in the play-in, the first four, and you're like, look, we won a game in the NCAA tournament. We beat the other 11 seed.
Here's what you need to know. Chaos ball is back in
was
Seattle.
The ninth inning.
Bottom of the ninth. It was the first time in a long time
Jose Caballero was making like Sam Haggerty out there.
that things have felt pretty exciting. Julio is very energized. Are you aware of the last vestige of the bad team? All players meeting.
Oh, yes. Love it.
When you get the reports of a players only meeting, you know your team is number one, bad, and number two, so fucking back.
And you know that your team is about to regress to the mean because they have been really unlucky in one-run games.
Look, that's
And
coming
guess
back
what?
too. The Mariners went
Guess
out of their
what?
way to make it a
So
one-run
worked
game.
so hard to make it a one-run game tonight. Incredible. You know what else happened today? Key to this victory.
What was that?
Mariners had an Italian back on the roster.
There we go.
Matt Festa.
Finally. The other news that people have been, speaking of Italians, that people have been waiting on was finding out whether any of my
the
children
champ of the
were
camp.
champ of the camp. And look, we went in Thursday was the last day of camp. People were so excited to see. Look, the older one, Luca, very good baseball player.
13 strikeouts and 5 2/3 innings.
Chopped liver at this camp. No one cared about him at all. And Mrs. Fantasy Genius is like, he's just like a normal Rock Creek player. He just goes and takes care of business. He does everything exactly as it's supposed to be done or whatever. He doesn't make a scene. Marco, though, when he showed up every single day, people were more and more excited. Like dropping them off, and these kids are just like, Marco's a fucking goat as he walks in. And I'm like, this is kind of incredible because baseball wise, we'll see. We'll see if he's a goat.
Developing.
Yeah, he's a second baseman, and
Making
his play so far might be Rich Amaral in '94 before the All-Star game, like, except without. I assume Rich Amaral's batting average wasn't bad. Anyway,
not as good as in 93.
these kids loved Marco. So I go into the last day, right? They're going to announce it at the end. All the parents are there watching. And I'm like, I feel like there's a chance because of the whispers. I mean, literally we're dropping him off and seeing kids so excited about him showing up. And they're like yelling his name. So we get there. They go through every single one of the winners of each of they have by age, like skills competitions where you do like base running, hitting, fielding, stuff like that. And so they're like the 12U division, the 11s, the 10s, the 9s. For the 8-9 division, Marco is the skills champ. And I was shocked to hear his name. Again, Luca is not even in the conversation. Like, nowhere to be seen in this conversation. And so they're like, all right, the moment you've all been waiting for. I see them talking too. Like, all the coaches are talking to each other or whatever. And they're like, all right, time to announce champ of the camp. And it wasn't Marco. Some
Tough
other
fade.
kid. I think the intel that I got was I think he finished second.
Wow.
And I'm
You
just
were
like,
that close to
oh no,
the
he was.
Jerry DePoto box.
I heard that he received votes at the very least, and there are not that many votes.
Yeah, they don't publish that like the NBA
No.
publishing the MVP voting.
Well, Luca's coaches, one of his sons was one of the people who voted, and he was like, yeah, I heard that Marco had a couple votes for champ of the camp, and I'm like, oh, it was so close. But he's still the 8-9 skills competition. I'm like that we were good with that. We were happy that he won that. That was something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I showed you Luca's 5 2/3, 13 strikeouts, 1 single hit, and 1 unearned run, and took the loss, which is why I gave him the nickname. The Orioles are throwing this nickname around also, but this motherfucker does not understand what life is like. That's why I gave him the nickname King Felix, because he understood what it was like to be King Felix for a decade.
Wait, who are the Orioles calling King Felix?
They have a reliever,
named Felix?
Felix Bautista or whatever.
You can't just call anyone
Yeah,
King
I'm
Felix.
aware. Also, the Felix Bautista he's a rookie, and everything's gone very well for him. Luca went 5 2/3, struck out 13, and gave up 1 hit and lost the game.
That is very Felix-esque.
We were talking about Felix after he was beating himself up about it. He was like, I lost us the game. And I'm like, dude, Felix threw a perfect game and somehow almost lost.
I wish I could say that was untrue, but maybe it isn't. All right, some other Mariners news. Bryce Miller was placed on the injured list with a blister that caused him to leave Friday night's start after 4 innings. The Seattle Times reported that Tommy Malone will be back up to fill Miller's spot in the rotation on Wednesday in the series finale in San Francisco. Also Monday, the Mariners traded Chris Flexen with Trevor Gott to the Mets for left-handed pitcher Zach Muckenhirn. Like Flexen, Muckenhirn was recently designated for assignment, will report to Tacoma, having made his major league debut this season at age 28, giving up 11 hits in 6 innings of relief. While Muckenhirn does provide some organizational depth, it's mostly the Mariners trading Gott to save the remaining $4 million on Flexen's
It felt like
salary.
an NBA trade, kind of.
Very much so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're attaching salary. You're like dumping salary to a player that is mildly desirable.
They got off that Joe Harris contract. All right, cracking news, NHL of free agency. A day after NBA free agency opened on Saturday, the Kraken opted not to make qualifying offers to Morgan Geekie and Daniel Sprong, making both players were unrestricted free agents. They quickly signed elsewhere, Sprong to Detroit, Geekie to Boston. Kraken also lost defenseman Carson Soucy, who signed with Vancouver after ranking 6th among Seattle backliners in ice time during the regular season, and Ryan Donato, who ranked 6th with 31 points in the inaugural season, but dropped to 27 points last season as the Kraken's attack improved. They'll replace Soucy with longtime Pittsburgh Penguin Brian Dumoulin, who was drafted by the Carolina Hurricanes when Seattle GM Ron Francis was working in player development there. Dumoulin subsequently was traded to Pittsburgh, played 10 seasons for the Penguins, winning a pair of Stanley Cups. He's coming off a career-high 25 points at age 31, will make ever so slightly less than Soucy over a 2-year deal as compared to Soucy's 3. The other addition so far for the Kraken in free agency, Spokane native Kyler Yamamoto, a winger who played for the Spokane Chiefs before being drafted in the first round by Edmonton in 2017. Yamamoto played 6 seasons for the Oilers, topping out at 41 points in 2021-22. That total dropped in large part because Yamamoto played just 58 games this past season after playing in 81 during 2021-22, the only time in his career he's played more than 60. Yamamoto did score the clinching goal as Edmonton beat the LA Kings in the opening round of the playoffs. He was subsequently traded to Detroit, bought out of the final year of his contract, paving the way for the Kraken to sign him to a 1-year deal for $1.5 million. Kraken did make qualifying offers to 4 players who remain free agents: Will Borgen, Vince Dunn, Cale Fleury, and Cole Lind. For the first time since May, the Seattle Sounders were victorious on Saturday.
Really? They went a whole month without winning?
They did.
Oof.
3 draws, 1 loss. Beating the Houston Dynamo, who were reduced to 10 men for a pair of yellows in the second half, with Albert Rushnak subsequently netting the only goal in the 67th minute. Sounders had been controlling the game previously, but had been unable to break through. Rushnak scored the goal while playing as an inverted winger after swapping spots with Nico Ladero, and Leo Chu had the assist as part of a really strong game for him coming off the wing. The win moved the Sounders into a tie for second in the West with LAFC, which still has 2 matches in hand. They will not make that up in the next week as the Sounders play a pair of matches on Saturday. They make their second trip of the season to Vancouver, facing the team that holds the 9th and final playoff spot in the West. The Wednesday after that, it's at surprising San Jose, which stands 6th in the West standings, 7th in points per match, having finished 14th in the West last season. So much improved San Jose. OL Reign, without the U.S. women's national team members, had a 2-2 draw Saturday against Racing Louisville at home, needing 2 late goals to earn that point. The visitors took the lead midway through the first half, extended to 2-0 in the 76th minute before the Reign scored twice in the last 10 minutes of the 90. Elise Bennett assisted sub Veronica Latsko on the first, scored the equalizer in the 87th minute. Reign are now all alone in 3rd place in the NWSL standings as they head to Orlando on Friday. The Pride come in 9th in the NWSL with a -7 goal differential, but they are coming off a 3-0 win over the Washington Spirit last weekend, which allowed the Reign to move ahead of the Spirit in the standings. All right, Seattle Storm news.
I'm just trying to get to the Bruce. Like, let's just go through the rundown fast. Let's get to the Born in the USA talk.
Our long watch is over. Gabby Williams has finally
There we go.
re-signed with the Storm for the remainder of the 2023
Did you report this?
season.
I saw you get credit as reporting this.
I confirmed it.
Okay.
It was first reported by M. Adler in the Next on Friday morning. Was able to confirm it Friday afternoon in the midst of writing about NBA free agency. After the Storm released guard Arella Garantes to clear a roster spot on Thursday, enough time has now passed that the Storm no longer needed to waive 2 players to make room for Williams' salary, so that was good news. She rejoins a team that has lost its last 3 games, following a season worst 8 games below 500. They played another thriller on Thursday against Minnesota, forcing overtime on a Jewel Lloyd score with 21 seconds remaining, but seeing the Lakes win it there. Rookie Diamond Miller tied the game with 11 seconds left, and after a Lloyd turnover forced by pressure on the inbounds pass, Nafisa Collier made the winner over a double team with a second remaining in that one. Sunday saw Brianna Stewart return to Seattle for the second time and score 14 points in the first quarter as the Liberty built a big lead early, cruised to an 81-66 victory. Joyner Holmes started both of those games for the Storm at power forward. Jordan Hurston sidelined Thursday, off the bench Sunday due to a shoulder injury. Previous starting center, Mercedes Russell, took a DNP CD against the Lynx and played sparingly against the Liberty. Be interesting to see how Gabby Williams slots into the lineup. possible she could play some at power forward if they want to start both her and her fellow UConn alum Kia Nurse. Otherwise, Williams started last year at small forward, could push Kia Nurse to the bench if they want to start bigger lineups. Williams will presumably join the Storm from France on this East Coast swing that features 4 games in 7 days at Connecticut, New York, Washington, and Atlanta as they wrap up play before the All-Star break.
Let me just ask about Gabby Williams.
Yeah.
Why did the Storm want Gabby Williams? How old is she?
She's still quite young. I think she's like 25. No, she's old. Maybe
Is this
she's
a
little-
long-term contract
No, it's presumably a 1-year contract.
through the end of the year?
Yes.
Let me ask the same question I asked again. Why do the Storm want Gabby Williams right now? Was she free to sign anywhere?
She was restricted, so no.
Okay. Is this basically just like there's a player who's more or less under contract and she should play here?
Well, she's about to turn 27. So she's certainly young enough to be part of this roster going forward. I mean, she's younger than Jewel Lloyd.
You're not answering my question.
I mean, she's a good player and was an important part of last year's team.
Do the Storm want to win right now? Is there tanking in the same way in the WNBA as there is in the NBA?
No,
There's not as explicit tanking.
not even close.
Everybody's trying more or less.
For the most part.
Is that kind of what this is? Could the Storm have been the first team to have truly tanked?
I mean, they wouldn't have been the first. We've seen teams because of injuries. Like Phoenix, the year they got Brittany Griner, basically did the San Antonio Spurs Tim Duncan situation, where they had some injuries. I think that might have been the season Diana Taurasi took off. And like, hey, great, we just dropped Brittany Griner in the middle of this team that was already pretty good.
Uh-huh.
So
I just don't. I understand their cumulative records.
which is why that happened, because of Phoenix that year.
Oh, really?
Yes,
They're the reason that they made the rule?
100%.
Oh, that's fun.
And Brianna Stewart, that was the other reason.
Because the Storm were bad for 1 year and they got Stewie.
No, the Storm actually benefited. Stewie was coming into the league, so they knew the teams might tank for Stewie, which the Storm,
It was a preemptive rule against tanking for Stewie.
yes, they wanted to not make it as easy to tank for Stewie. But then it really benefited the Storm, who had been bad the previous season.
And they weren't that bad the year that they drafted Stewie.
They were still not good, but San Antonio was the worst team in the league that season and did not get the number 1 pick.
But there's still a lottery on top of this.
Correct.
This is just for lottery odds.
Correct.
It's like kind of going far out of their way to plan against tanking.
Whatever has happened most recently is whatever teams try to leagues try to legislate against.
I'm not sure. What is the record right now? 4-12.
12.
Would you say that they're eliminated from the playoffs?
I would not say that, no.
How many games back are they?
I mean, like, nobody's really running away with those last playoff spots, let me tell you. Minnesota, having gone on a 3-game winning streak, is at 7-9, is now the last playoff spot. So if the Storm had won those 2 games against Minnesota, both of which were competitive, they would then be ahead of Minnesota in the standings.
They're only 3 games back.
Yes.
Whereas I look at the Mariners and I'm like, they're right in it.
I mean, there's a lot more games in baseball. There's only 40 in the WNBA season.
So we are a chunk of the way through the season right now.
Yeah.
I honestly, like, I get it. Is there leverage? The trade deadline hasn't passed yet.
It has not passed.
Are they able to trade Gabby Williams?
I think so. I haven't, studied this.
Is that something that happens as well, where you're trading players at the deadline?
It's very difficult because, the WNBA, they have a hard cap. It's not like the trade rules in the NBA where you just have to be within X percent. Like, both teams have to enter
have to match
under
the
the
salaries.
hard cap. So that's a real challenge.
Fair enough. I just kind of see this as this is the most important lottery of the Storm's history and maybe WNBA history to a certain extent.
I don't know if I go that far. I still think the Sue Bird lottery was probably the most important in the Storm's history.
Sue Bird was nowhere near as famous as Caitlin Clark is right now
I
in college. Not even close.
That's probably true, but women's basketball wasn't as big of a deal, period, as it is now. Like, Sue Bird, relative to what women's basketball was then, or relative to what the WNBA was then, I think still may have been bigger than Caitlin Clark.
Who's
is relative
better,
to the WNBA.
Caitlin Clark or Sue Bird?
I mean, Subert is, one of the greatest players. He's the greatest point guard in WNBA
At
history.
the time, not knowing what would happen with Subert as a
Is
professional.
Caitlin Clark a better prospect than Subert? Probably.
Is Caitlin Clark the best prospect of all time?
No, I don't think I would go that far. Shamiko Holtzclaw might have been the best prospect of all time.
Okay, I remember that.
I mean, what's interesting about Sue is like she's such an amazing amplifier. Not that Sue isn't a great player in her own right, but like putting her on a team with Lauren Jackson. Whereas Caitlin Clark, to me, is much more like single-handedly take you places. I mean, she's much
kind of
more.
what the Storm need right now, though.
Well, they do have the leading scorer in the league,
All right.
and Joe Light. Like if they got Paige,
Jeremy Grant's gonna be the leading scorer next year.
like
He's gonna put up. He's
Well,
gonna put up numbers.
I
Jeremy Grant.
don't know if Scoot's gonna allow that.
Jeremy Grant's averaging 30 plus next year.
Like Paige Beckers is the Sue comp.
Okay.
Like she's the one who would come in and make everybody else that much better. And like again, not that Caitlin Clark can't do that. But Caitlin Clark to me is more the Tarasi in this year's group. If you're going to compare it to anyone,
Okay, but these are all very good comparisons.
No,
You're
I
comparing
agree.
to like the best players of all time, and it also feels like very rarely in WNBA history has there been a player that hyped who hasn't been very good. Because of the competition at college, doesn't it feel like players are coming
because
like
of the fact you've played 4 years.
the jump between college basketball and WNBA basketball is not as great as it is from being like a promising freshman in
Aaliyah Boston is starting the All-Star game. And it's maybe a little bit of a stretch. I didn't pick her, but she was certainly an All-Star. She was in the conversation to start.
is the first pick this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, you don't... It's not like Wembanyama is going to come in and start the All-Star game this year unless he gets a lot
vote
of
or
fan
whatever.
votes.
But like you understand what I'm saying.
I do.
Like there's not as big of a leap.
Yeah.
And most often like players who
I mean,
are
I'm trying
coming
to think who was the most disappointing number 1 overall pick in WNBA history. And I'm not sure what that answer is, but it probably was not someone nearly this hyped is the answer.
But if the Storm like are just good enough to push for the playoffs this year and then miss the playoffs, they don't get as many ping pong balls or whatever.
I mean, it's not a dramatic difference, but yes.
Is that worth it right now? Does that make sense?
It wouldn't be my approach. I'm also not running an organization that's trying to sell tickets at the moment.
But is Gabby Williams really the difference between if somebody is there? Look, they've obviously priced their tickets way too high. They could have never seen that Breonna Stewart was going to leave when she was a free agent the next year. But like, some mistakes were made. Do you think that the difference between somebody being like, I'm going to pay $50 for a ticket to the Storm is being 3 games under 500 versus being 10 games under 500?
I think the difference might be I went to the game and saw them win versus I went to the game and saw them lose in overtime.
These are motherfucking season ticket holders this year. There are not single game ticket buyers at these games.
There are some, obviously.
It is a small amount. They are season ticket holders, and they are going to be lucky if they re-up next year.
Well, they're re-upping next year, maybe contingent on the lottery.
Oh, exactly. Which, again, comes back to, do you need Gabby Williams right now? What is more important is maintaining your season ticket holder base. And the season ticket holder base is going to be a lot more engaged if they have Caitlin Clark on the roster. It'll go up. If Caitlin Clark is on this roster,
I agree it will.
they would have... But there's a long way to go. I get it. But I don't know. I'm just kind of like, I'm not sure I see the logic of this signing.
I think the logic is that Gabby Williams is a good player to whom they had restricted free agent rights. She wanted to play in the WNBA this season.
I get it. They should try to trade her.
We'll see.
Learn something. NBA teams have figured this out.
Again, it's much easier to make trades in the NBA.
NBA teams have figured out tanking too.
It's also much easier to tank in the NBA. Not really, actually, because you only get 14% odds if you have the worst record. In the WNBA, the last team in the lottery, as we've talked about, has basically the same odds of winning the number 1 pick. They have 10% odds if you're the lowest team in the lottery.
Really?
Yeah, because there's only 4 teams.
There's only 4 teams in the lottery?
Yeah, and there's 14 in the NBA.
So if the Storm if they're in the lottery this year, which they almost certainly will be,
They're likely to be, yeah.
they would have a 25% chance.
No, I'm saying Well, yeah. I mean, if you independent of who the other teams are and what their record is, yes.
What are the numbers?
Again, it's like 44. I don't know. Probably.
Somebody has an almost 50% chance of the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Just fucking lose, Storm.
I mean,
Are you kidding me? They have a 50. They could they be bad enough to have the number 1?
Again, I have
lottery
not had
chances?
time to look at the 2-year records yet.
How much time can it take? Look, it's not like anything else is happening in your life in the NBA right now. This is all you're paying attention to.
Sorry,
If this
I'm
is,
twiddling my
I am.
thumbs.
Am I the only person talking about this?
I don't know if you're the only person talking about it. You're probably the most gung-ho about taking. Because I feel like I'm more in on, like, lottery positioning than most people I talk to. And you're much more so than I am.
If they've,
It helps that you don't have to watch any of the games right now. You just have bear none of the downside of taking.
it doesn't matter. That gives you the right to enjoy seeing Caitlin Clark play by watching these games. For me, I'll just be a bandwagon fan. Okay, that's fine. You can hold it over me that you sat through this season, and you know what? We'll both be happy that way. We both get Caitlin Clark. You could be a little bit more condescending. Everybody gets what they want. How is it possible that if all you have to do is just lose one season and you have a chance at a generational player at an almost 50% chance?
Again, 2 seasons potentially. Like, if Indiana's in the lottery, it does not matter what the Storm does.
What is the next odds?
I don't know. It's like 30 or something. I don't know.
These are extraordinary odds.
I agree. I guess it's not that high.
It kind of has to be, right?
Yeah, it's probably
40, 30, 20, 10, something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. That's
So
all I have
Gabby
to say.
Williams joining the Storm.
That's all I have
on
to
this
say
East
about
Coast
that.
road trip.
I mean, look, I'm happy for Gabby Williams playing. I think the rule is stupid that she even had to wait this long or whatever.
She didn't have to wait this long. It had nothing to do with the rules anymore. This was just because of her recovery from the concussion.
Okay.
She could have signed as soon as she wanted.
Was there a way that she could have signed with somebody else this offseason?
In the offseason?
Or no?
Like, nobody realistically is going to commit that cap space to her not knowing whether she was going to be eligible to play. So that's where the rule did come into
They
play.
should trade Gabby Williams for a draft pick and an expiring contract.
Perhaps they will do that.
I would be on the
I'm not-
phones trying to find that team right now.
I'm not counting on it, but I'm not
4th
gonna
of
rule it out.
July, I'd be there being like, hey,
Yeah.
every single team.
Fireworks are going off. You're on your phone at the barbecue.
If it meant that there was a chance of Caitlin Clark coming to Seattle, because things are bleak after that. If there's no Caitlin Clark, it is bleak for this roster.
Caitlin Clark. There's a lot of good players potentially in this year's draft. Caitlin Clark also might not be in this year's draft, as a reminder. She can choose to go back for a 5th year. Iskin Paige Beckers, who's probably more likely to do it because she hasn't played the last 2 years or didn't play last year due to injury and missed much of her sophomore year. We heard last week on the pod from Jake One, got the scouting report on Stanford's Cameron Brink, who can also be in this year's draft.
Okay. There are other players.
Angel Reese from LSU.
Oh, well, Angel Reese.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's a loaded draft. So born in the USA.
That worked good.
We're through the rundown.
Okay.
I mean, you know that my number one in Born in the USA,
What's that?
it's 2 album cuts. Downbound Train
Oh,
and I'm on Fire.
Oh, I'm on Fire as a single.
Was it a single?
That's
Okay.
not an album cut. But it's interesting. So I was telling the children today, I guess a couple of thoughts on Born in the USA. We're fully transitioning this.
I mean,
I feel like it is kind of like the most important American album of all time.
wow.
It's come to signify American rock music, right? You don't agree with that?
I don't know that I would use that phrase. No.
It was a massive album. It's
I
called
agree with
Born
that.
in the USA. There's an American flag
So
on the
all
cover,
of that's true.
right? And it's by like probably the most important working class American artist.
That's a big statement. He's certainly
He's the
way
most
up there.
representative of working class American. There's almost nobody else competing for that title.
I think that there are some non-white people who might
but that the content in particular.
Point out that you're using a very white frame of what working class America constitutes.
I understand that, but you get what I'm saying. It is intentionally framed that way.
Sure.
And it was so interesting listening to Born in the USA with the children and being like, do you want to know what the song is about? And then breaking it down. Boom, 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 boom. You know what I mean?
How quickly did they tell you?
What?
Shut up, Dad.
No. They were
into it?
They weren't into it, but they were fine with it.
They were learning about Wayne?
Right? Like, they were learning about the Viet Cong. Like, not the whole album. We're talking about Born in the USA, the song.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Not the whole album. The whole album's kind of everywhere, but Born in the USA, the song, talking to them. Luke already understands this, that it's more or less like protest song is probably too far. It's not the fucking 60s, you know what I mean? But like...
But it's not the song that Reagan was trying to thought it was.
It's not a patriotic anthem. It is about the problems that had happened in America, how we're not taking care of our service members. We sent people off to war for more or less nothing, right? For decades. I was telling the children, I was like, America was in this war with Vietnam for reasons. And all these people came back. They didn't have jobs after that. They had friends that died in the war or whatever.
The theory? Did you get into the domino theory? Is that the theory?
I told them that they were fighting a shadow war with Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, it got complicated. But so talking about that song, but I still feel like
people are still fighting shadow wars with Russia. But...
Exactly. And we're back at it again, baby. 1984 is back. I feel like that's what makes it the most quintessential American album, though. Because if it wasn't, that song in particular, if it was all about patriotism, the song would be fucking trash. You know what I mean? It would not be a song. Bruce Springsteen wouldn't write it. And it would not be a song that would have lasted for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
Right? Because unbridled patriotism is not interesting.
I don't know. I feel like there is a certain brand of patriotism. Like there's the fact that God Bless America is played on every Sunday in the 7th inning stretch of baseball games.
It's different.
God
Bless America is different. So I thought that was interesting. But then also in the context of this album, that I feel like in Bruce's career, when we were kids, when we were growing up, when I was first getting into rock music, the essential Bruce Springsteen album was Born to Run.
Of course.
There was no doubt about it. And the album that you liked if you were cool was Nebraska, and the album that was actually dope was Darkness on the Edge of Town. Right? That's fair. A fair assessment.
I suppose.
Born in the USA in the Spotify era, Spotify has a tendency, for better or worse, Spotify has a tendency to amplify sometimes the best songs. Where you look at an artist where you're like, I actually am shocked that these songs are the biggest songs because it's shit that I liked that I felt like weren't like the biggest songs.
Like I'm on Fire?
And whereas I'm on Fire, 370 million plays.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking. And the Dancing in the Dark is by such a dramatic margin the most played song off this album.
Spotify also will amplify hits over time. And Born in the USA has a lot more hits than any other Bruce album.
It will also amplify songs with music videos starring Courtney Cox.
I think that helped it. But so if you look at Bruce Springsteen on Spotify, top 3 songs, 1, 2, 3, are all Born in the USA songs. Wow. And I think over time, in the modern era, his most important album is now Born in the USA.
It's interesting because my Born in the USA experience is like listening to your CD of it constantly in your room while playing Madden Dynasties on PlayStation 2, probably, maybe Xbox by that point, during the college years, more or less.
Somewhere around there,
like in the summers during college.
2003, 2004.
Yeah, there was a lot of time. That and the Harvest album, those are the 2 albums I was hitting hard at that point.
Harvest is banging. But critically, not as like acclaimed as those other albums, right?
No.
Like critics were they were born to run people. And I think over time that transformed. And I think a lot of people sort of took Born in the USA as a little bit of, not a joke, but like intentionally commercial.
Yeah.
Which was not a critical thing. And I think also over time...
Well, there was a lot more distinction between commercial and critical success
Yes.
in 1984.
Well, that's what else I'm saying is I think
2023.
over time critics became less important.
Yeah.
Popularity became more important.
Yep.
Like music that is successful is cooler now than it was in 1984.
Yeah.
But also, there are just some weird songs on this album. Okay.
Darlington County.
So you're a downbound train guy.
I am a downbound train guy. I don't know that I can like make a lyrical argument for downbound train, but just hits for me.
The breakdown at the end when he's talking about it. Oh my God. No, that's some peak Bruce right there.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily Darkness on the Edge of Town. I feel like I was telling the children, I was like, you know what makes a classic album? It's like you have your hits, but every single song is like important and memorable on its own.
Yes.
And I actually feel like more than Darkness on the Edge of Town is not really in conversation. Easily his best album, but like more than Born to Run, and I think more than Nebraska. It's like each of these songs, I'm like, I have a specific like perspective and emotion about each of these songs. Bobby Jean comes on, you're like, oh
I can't believe that's got so few plays. That's wild to me. How Bobby Jean has just kind of been lost to history. I mean, Glory Days, also a little surprising it's not closer to the biggest hits from this one. Like that is such a, like it captures a certain nostalgia in a way that I don't think any other song has done as well.
Oh yeah, no, I'm like choked up listening to it. I'm like emotional when I listen to it.
Because you're thinking back to your high school days that were the high point
The
of your
Glory
life.
Days? No, the whole time I'm just like, you always imagine other people. Every song is about somebody else. You're not the main character in that song. You're the main character in some other songs. Bruce songs, you kind of never are.
Fair.
It's always a guy. You know? You hear it and you're like, "Phew, thank God that's not me." But like, I can see this. That's why he's a like great lyricist or whatever.
You're the narrator in this one. You're Bruce Springsteen.
But kind of just like top to bottom. Even if this isn't like lyrically, it is much more commercial. Where he's like, we like the same records, we like the same things, and you're like, that doesn't really sound
I
like.
thought it was we like the same bands.
Or we like the same bands. That's in there, yes. But also, you're like, it's so like non-specific.
Right. It could apply to anything.
This record is way less specific than almost any other Bruce record from the peak era, 1978 to 1984. Or
Much less specific than
no,
Greetings
it's more than that.
Greetings
It's
from
longer than that.
Asbury Park.
Like 1973 to 1984.
Wait, do we determine how is that? How is that word name actually pronounced?
Ashbury Park?
Yeah. Because we were doing it wrong before, right?
Ashbury Park. It's pronounced like Asbury Park, I think.
Yeah.
But then you have Darlington County, which to me is the greatest 4th of July anthem of all time.
I can't empathize with Wayne.
You can't. No, nobody can empathize with Wayne, but there's always a Wayne around.
The
Just
person
the
who's
name Wayne
stuck
too.
with Wayne.
Our pops each own one of the World Trade Centers. I'm telling the kids. I'm like, does anybody know what happened to those? It's like a history lesson going through. They know all about it, and I was like, yeah, they were knocked down by airplanes on September 11, 2001, the day that the blueprint came out. And Mateo was like, oh yeah, yeah, I know that. That to him, that's all September 11th, 2001 is the day the blueprint came out.
Really context.
But like the just the little like subtle things where he's like a union connection from an Uncle Wayne and
Yes.
stuff. There's just like little Bruce moments that I feel like they make it Bruce more than it's like a country song or something like that. And that when I'm talking to the children, I'm just like, you can't even hear this. Like you just have so little frame of reference for who this person is that Bruce is talking about. And then he's sexy on I'm on Fire.
Whoa, I'm on fire.
It really, I'm a little shocked. Is it the third most played song on this? It's like close to Born in the USA.
I mean, it was pretty prominent in the tour, I suppose. I will say that, wasn't it? So
That wasn't one of the top 3 songs though on Spotify. It's Dance. Oh no, it is number 2. Dance in the Dark, I'm on Fire, Born in the USA.
that's wild.
And then Glory Days is number 6. It's kind of bonkers.
Because when I was listening to that in circa 2003, I had no context that I'm on Fire was popular.
Look at that.
My
Right.
sense was always Dancing in the Dark, Born in the USA, and Glory Days
Yeah,
were the
I
big
think
songs off
I
that
think
album.
those when we were kids, I think those were the biggest hits.
Yeah.
This Bruce. Here's the thing about it, amplifying songs though. Spotify amplifying songs that are good. Badlands at number 8, less plays than like The River or Thunder Road or whatever. Which, by the way, those three best songs you ever record. But
Do we have a list of the Springsteen songs that we played at your wedding?
did we play a lot of Springsteen songs? About it?
Yeah. You don't remember that? It was
It sounds
amazing.
great. Wish I was there. Badlands being in that spot though, being at the Bruce Springsteen's 8th biggest song on Spotify. Again, when we were kids, that would have been unheard of. That Badlands would have been that high, like commercially.
All right, let's go through the singles order from Born in the USA. Number 1, Dancing in the Dark. Number 2, Cover Me.
Oh man, that was kind of an L. That's a good track, but
Number 3, Born in the USA. Number 4, I'm on Fire. 5, Glory Days. 6, I'm Going Down. And 7, My Hometown. Well over a year and a half after no, I guess not quite a year and a half. Well over a year after the album came out.
those are the glory days also when you can release 7 singles. Right now, it's like 6 months after an album's out, and we're just like, I guess the campaign's over. We got nothing else left to do.
Yep.
Like we've played everywhere. We've played all the way to Detroit. We've got no other moves. Back then, Bruce Springsteen would be like, all right, it's time to release Born in the USA as a single finally.
It's single number 3 in November. Or in October. I feel like
And a lot of people just had no idea what the fuck it was either.
real missed opportunity to not
I
release
mean-
that one in June.
He'd sold, obviously, millions of records at that point. But
Yeah.
there were so many people out there who just never heard the song until it was a single. Ugh.
Well, there were different times.
Anyway, for me, I mean, Bruce is eternal, obviously. I will listen to Bruce any place, anytime. And then you have moments where you get really excited about Bruce. Around the 4th of July, though, that to me is the best Bruce time, when it's sunny outside and you're feeling just a little depressed.
If you've spent a lot of time in the state of New Jersey, strictly in the airport and
Yeah, tell me about your experience being in New Jersey. I've been in New Jersey as driving through it one time and flying into Newark Airport.
Yeah. I mean, I stayed intentionally in Newark before. This time I stayed, the hotel was like across the street from the Meadowlands.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You remember I was supposed to go to Asbury Park, New Jersey. I was supposed to go to a music,
The music
festival.
festival, yeah.
And,
That was when your band got COVID.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that note, happy 4th of July, everyone, if you're listening then. If not, hope you had a good one.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.